I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
Let me emphasize, we are still in what I would call a very fluid period. Things have not settled.
A dramatic change and an uncertain future in Syria. As questions swirl about the country's leadership, the UN urges caution and patience.
There is no reason for this war to continue. We need a ceasefire now.
The General Assembly votes on a ceasefire resolution for Gaza and calls for more aid in the Palestinian territory.
It's a global phenomenon, and this is something that you need concert efforts, from the whole international community across all spectrum.
Preparing for and coping with the effects of climate change. A conversation with Thailand's ambassador. Next.
Syria is now at a crossroad with great opportunities, but also with grave risks. And we need really to look at both.
The UN is closely monitoring events in Syria. Armed opposition groups seized the capital Damascus on Sunday. Longtime President Bashar al-Assad is now reportedly in Moscow. It's not yet clear who will lead the country. Syria has endured nearly 14 years of civil war, and the UN warns the situation on the ground is fluid, with continued fighting in the northeast and Israeli airstrikes in Syrian territory. The UN is also working to meet humanitarian needs for those inside Syria and the more than 5 million refugees in neighboring countries.
Before the recent events, nearly 17 million people, including millions of internally displaced people, already required humanitarian assistance. And since the 28th of November, more than 1 million people, mostly women and children, have been displaced across Idlib, Aleppo, Hama, and Homs.
From the Security Council to the briefing room and beyond, Shudija is monitoring the latest developments inside the UN. Dija.
Yes, Elaine. This week, the 10th Emergency Special Session of the UN General Assembly resumed its discussion on the situation in Gaza. Once again, most member states called for an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages, while expressing solidarity with UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The session also adopted not one but two resolutions with overwhelming majorities. One carried a rather lengthy title, Support for the Mandate of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East. The other was titled simply, Demand for a Ceasefire in Gaza. In essence, the resolutions did exactly what their titles suggest. Well, initially, we expected the emergency special session and the adoption of the two resolutions to dominate the headlines this week. But as it turns out, not just me, but many of my colleagues were mistaken. Syria, for the first time in years, has unequivocally returned to the center of global discussions. After a rebel group took control of Damascus, Russia and several African countries in the Security Council called for a closed-door consultation on the situation in Syria. Well, what did everyone say? What do you think of the situation now unfolds in Syria?
We are following the situation very closely, and we want to see the situation stabilized as soon as possible. And we do hope that an inclusive political process can be initiated as soon as possible. And the factions and parties in Syria should take the interests of the people as their priority.
All of these things require a lot of actors, so there's been a huge amount of diplomacy over the weekend with phone calls and meetings. My Prime Minister is on the way to the Middle East right now, and he'll be having talks with countries in the neighbourhood. So I think there's a lot of diplomacy going on. It needs to include the P5, it needs to include countries of the region, but ultimately it's about the Syrian people and getting behind them and their aspirations for a better future.
What I can share is that, according to diplomats, all council members agreed on one key point: Stability is crucial during this period, and an inclusive government must be formed as soon as possible. But beyond that, a wide range of issues were raised, including chemical weapons, accountability, but consensus was limited. The rebel group now in control, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is an officially designated terrorist organization by the Security Council. And this raises a pressing question. How will the Council address this? Will the Security Council consider delist the terrorist group?
We will try. I think it is important that we try our best to prevent a resurgence of the terrorist groups.
Well, the U.S. considering delisting HTS as the terrorist group so far.
Look, they remain a designated terrorist organization.
Then how would this play out?
Well, let's let it play out and let's see. We're going to judge them by their actions, but they remain a designated terrorist organization. It's still in place right now, but this is a ever-changing situation right now. Let's see how things play out, but we're going to protect our interests, which is making sure that U.S. personnel are secure.
Any thoughts from Secretary General?
There's one issue here for the future in Syria, which is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is labeled as terrorist group.
Indeed, it is.
Personally, I didn't see how this would play out, but from the Secretary General's point of view, how would this thing be solved? Would they be like delist as terrorist group from the Security Council, or what kind of criteria?
I understand where you're getting at. Security Council will take whatever decisions Security Council makes. We have to deal with the immediate in the reality now. As in other places, we have contacts with de facto authorities for operational reasons within our mandate, right? That's permissible and acceptable, and is critical to us being able to fulfill the mandates that member states and even sometimes the Security Council themselves have given us.
Well, meanwhile, following the fall of the Assad government, Israel launched what the IDF described as a temporary measure to control and expand the buffer zone in the Golan Heights. In addition, the IDF carried out massive strikes, effectively crippling Syria's military capacity. Anything the UN wanted to say?
Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Golan Heights will be part of State of Israel for eternity. What is the reaction of the Secretary General of this? For his words?
We continue to consider the Golan Heights occupied territory. I think we were very clear about the violation of the disengagement agreement following the IDF occupation of the buffer zone.
During the last couple of days, they actually targeted 320 Syrian military targets, which including the whole Syrian Navy fleet. What is the Secretary General's position on this kind of action there?
I think, first of all, Mr. Pedersen addressed that this morning. It is very clear that we stand against any violation of the territorial integrity of Syria. We are against these types of attacks. I think this is a turning point for Syria. It should not be used by its neighbors to encroach on the territory of Syria. It should be used by all those in the region and beyond to support the Syrian people so they can choose their own path.
Well, many believe this marks the beginning of a new chapter for the Syrian people. But what that chapter holds remains uncertain, and we will continue to cover the story as events unfold. And that's all from me. Elaine.
Shudija, thanks. Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda.
The international community, especially the traditional donors, should pay attention to the DRC's displacement crises, the spread of infectious diseases such as mpox, as well as the issue of food insecurity, and scale up humanitarian financing to ease the humanitarian plight.
The Security Council received an update on the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Fighting has escalated in parts of the country recently. The conflict and climate impacts have forced more than 6 million people from their homes. Gang violence intensified in Haiti's capital. Over the weekend, more than 150 people were killed on the orders of a gang leader grieving his son. More than 5,000 people have been killed in Haiti this year. 2024 is expected to mark a record year for global trade. UN Trade and Development says talk of tariffs makes the 2025 outlook uncertain.
Coming up.
Climate mitigation is one of the things that we attach highest importance to.
UN Insider.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Thailand is one of the countries most vulnerable to climate change. The Southeast Asian nation has had to contend with extreme heat, drought, and flooding. Thailand is also vulnerable to rising sea levels and the risk of tsunamis and other disasters. I sat down with Thailand's UN Ambassador, Churchai Chaiwavid. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It has been 20 years since that devastating Indian Ocean tsunami where more than 225,000 people died in 14 different countries in that region. Can you share some of your memories of what happened while you were in Thailand and what your country has done since then and the lessons learned?
Certainly, I was there with everybody else. I was put in charge of coordination for foreign assistance right after the tsunami hit the region. The only natural disasters that we knew back then was perhaps flooding. So tsunami was something that surprised us when it hit Thailand on December 26th, 2004. And we eventually lost about 5,000 lives from this natural disaster. So over the years, we have learned from that disaster. Disaster preparedness has been incorporated into school curriculum. We have set up a fund to make sure that we have enough finance when it comes to capacity building, to make sure that this fund goes to villages for their disaster preparedness program. We have necessary financing to make sure that people get enough equipment, technology to cope with any unexpected natural disaster. 20 years on, we are in a better place. If you compare to that fateful day.
Ambassador, Thailand is also vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. and other natural disasters. What have you noticed over the years about the changes in your country as the world has just marked the hottest year on record?
Climate mitigation is one of the things that we attach highest importance to. We are an active member of the UNFCCC, and Thailand has, I think this year we already submitted a national plan to make sure that we have enough framework for us to adapt to climate crisis. A couple of years ago, when Thailand hosted Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation (APEC), one of the main outcome documents focused mainly on what we introduce as the biocircular green economy. And this is part of our policy drive to make sure that we have an economy that is friendly to climate mitigation. We make sure that we recycle. We make sure that we go for green economy. Climate mitigation to me is a process. And you need to make sure that we and the rest of the world undertake this process in the same direction. You cannot have one country look at climate crisis differently from the other country across the border. It's a global phenomenon, and this is something that you need concerted efforts, from the whole international community across all spectrum.
Thailand has had a decades-long history and relationship with UN peacekeeping. Talk to us a little bit about the focus of that, why it's been so important, and the status of your contributions right now.
We have joined the United Nations peacekeeping operation since 1958. The number contributed so far is around almost 30,000 troops that we have sent. Thailand is not a big country by any means, but we always do whatever we can to make sure that we contribute to this very important work of the UN. And we are everywhere, from Asia to Africa to Latin America, part of Europe. Now our contribution is focused on Sudan and South Sudan, and I'm pleased to learn that a good proportion of our peacekeeping officers are female, and that is something that we want to improve.
Thailand and China are about to mark 50 years of diplomatic ties. Talk to us a little bit about how this relationship has evolved over the years, especially when it comes to trade, investment, and development.
China is our biggest trading partner, and I think it's by default that economic cooperation with China is among our top foreign policy priorities. And the fact that China has been our neighbor for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, it's only natural that relationship with China is at the heart of our foreign policy, especially our role in the region. We have all this ASEAN-China FTA, which is very important to our trade policy. China is one of our main partners in APEC. And we cooperate with China on a great deal on a lot of projects under APEC. The Chinese investment in Thailand is huge. And we have become a base for Chinese production. So yeah, hugely important. Not to mention our famous tourism industry. Chinese visitors to Thailand, I think it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, source of income for our tourism industry. So very important.
Ambassador Chaibazit, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
UN Insider.
Holding guns. Word protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Quality education is Sustainable Development Goal number 4. More than 110 million children have enrolled in school since the SDGs were implemented in 2015. On the Colombia-Venezuela border, children are relentlessly pursuing an education and dreams of a better life.
Un día normal, me baño, me paro, voy para allá, para clase. Después los deja el transporte, los regresamos y después los vamos otra vez y después los deja después.
Sebastián only began going to school 6 months ago after begging his family.
Los niños le cuentan a Sebastián de la voluntad de Dios qué divertida es esta escuela, que ellos aquí vienen a jugar, que se divierten, que aprenden, que bailan, que cantan, que juegan. Y Sebastián, llorando, durante muchos meses, nos cuenta la abuela, le pedía que lo trajera. Pero la señora, por la condición de él, tenía temor.
Sebastián has a physical impairment, an undiagnosed condition on his leg that makes it difficult for him to walk. The principal of his school, Georgina De Luque, believes it could be lymphatic filariasis, commonly known as elephantiasis, which produces abnormal enlargement of body parts due to an infection. But this doesn't stop Sebastián from dreaming of being a doctor.
Porque eso es bien porque para yo ayudar a uno que está enfermo.
Sebastián lives in Venezuela, but he crosses the border to Colombia every day to attend school, which is 5 kilometers away. His parents have migrated to Barranquilla, a Colombian city hours away, because they have not found work in their town in the Venezuelan state of Zulia.
Él tiene la doble nacionalidad por su condición indígena. Su mamá, por esa misma situación económica, se ha tenido que ir a trabajar a Barranquilla. Y es la situación de muchas de las familias de los niños que nosotros atendemos. Sus progenitores han tenido que migrar a ciudades del interior del país, incluso al exterior. Y los niños están quedando al cuidado de abuelas y familiares, que en el caso de Sebastián está muy bien cuidado.
This education center, called Voluntad de Dios, meaning God's will in Spanish, is part of 5 different small schools that make up Colombia's Indigenous Education Center, number 6. Georgina de Luque has been the principal here for the last 2 decades. These Colombian public institutions bring education to faraway border communities in Maicao, La Guajira region. More than 2,100 students receive their primary education in these 5 schools. De Luque says many students' only meal comes from the school, and assuring that the institution has the constant resources to provide an adequate nutrition is a big challenge.
El ministerio habla, y en realidad es así por la cantidad, de un complemento nutricional, pero que en realidad, en muchos de nuestros casos, se convierte en lo único que puede recibir el niño durante el día. Hemos encontrado casos de niños que cualquier día se nos desmayan, le preguntamos qué comiste ayer y nos dice el menú que se le dio acá. Cuando entramos a indagar resulta que no comió más nada, no porque no quiera, sino que básicamente no tuvo que comer.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is a special edition of UN Insider.
UN Insider serves as an important window for the global audience to better understand multilateral diplomacy.
It's very important for the media to cover the United Nations, to seek to understand and tell the story in ways that the average person in the street can understand.
I think it's very important that the media should contribute to conveying important messages about the reality of today's challenges.
UN Insider has come to the UN, and we at the UN are so grateful to have it here. It is the only dedicated TV program to what is happening in the UN, and it is reaching so many people with, as it says in its title, inside the UN stories.
Media plays an important role in providing objective information across the world.
We think that media has a strong power of uplifting, what we are trying to convey as messages as developing countries.
We need the mobilization of all peoples, of whole government and whole of society, and media can help us to be informed so that we also can make our part.
I think the media is fundamental to enable citizens across the world, first of all, to understand what is the rationale of having the United Nations. It's not that there is one place on planet Earth that will tell the rest of the world what to do. It is a much more complex story.